You're also a former hedge fund manager. So, you know these two worlds. So when you look at the mathematics of that and you project it out, what is it telling you about where we're going economically?
So when we look at the mathematics and where we're going, from this particular perspective, it shows us basically that we're a bit screwed because you have different types of entities organizing, but the ones that can map and predict the best are the AIs. Recently, this week, we've seen AIs go from like 20 minutes of thinking time to 200 minutes and more. And they're getting more and more capable, and this is the takeoff year for that. The human capacity for optimizing and adapting to the environment is capped by our brains, whereas AI, we can just scale almost infinitely. You can have multiple agents, which can now think for arbitrarily long periods of time. You can do almost any cognitive labor. And what we found is that human cognitive labor doesn't go to zero in value, it actually goes negative, which intuitively is true.
Because we will come to the wrong conclusion.
Because we're the weakest member of the team. If you have AI that's constantly learning, adapting, and can think for arbitrary periods of time and can scale its cognition and check each other's work, then you're the weakest link on the team. Just like, again, that person who's the least intelligent is the weakest link on your team. And so how do you compete against economies that are AI almost entirely? The AI will outcompete you. And so we see this lack of balance, particularly when it comes to things like capital accumulation, what the objective function is. And then it comes to mind, what are we actually measuring? What is the kind of meaning behind this? Because our current measurements are a bit wonky. Like some of the examples.
Specifically GDP.
GDP. Again, Stan Kuznets, who came up with GDP, actually went in front of Senate and said, this is the wrong measurement. Cancer is good for GDP and it makes it go up. Solving and curing cancer is bad for GDP. It's like looking at just one particular type of capital. And what our equation showed us was that there's actually 4 distinct types of capital. And so when we look at that, we see a history whereby you're going through almost the final, what we call great inversion, which we can discuss in a minute, where the AIs will outcompete us. And we have to start measuring things differently. And then we have to think about the way money and other things flow differently if we're going to thrive in what's coming.
An important thing for me to always remember is there is the moon and there is the finger pointing at the moon. So GDP is a finger. It is not the moon itself. Presumably the measurements you're talking about now are fingers, not moons. So what is the moon? Is it human well-being? Is it growth? Like, what are we actually trying to get at with these measurements?
So I think what we're trying to get at with the measurements is a couple of things. One is that we want to have stable systems. We don't want to have wild systems that go back and forth. And we want to really look at, again, things like flourishing, happiness, contentment. Right now, because we over-focus on one thing, we all know lots of very rich people who are very, very sad. Like there's no real correlation. Like you get to a point where, hey, I don't need to worry about starving and I live an okay life, but then it's not like happiness scales with wealth. What we found is that there's 4 types of capital. And those are material capital. That's the scarce stuff. I give you an apple, you take the apple. I don't have the apple. There's intelligence. It's the people listening to this podcast, right? Like, how much does it cost to give them the ideas and concepts? Hopefully it enriches them. Then there's the network effects, the N. Over your career, you've built up this amazing network of people that you have contact with, and that gives you real power and ability and capability. And you're in Los Angeles and you've got your network there as well. And the final thing is diversity, that resilience, whereby, you can do lots of different things. You have lots of different options, from portfolios to friendship circles to more. And we found that you can kind of show those mathematically. And when those are in balance and it's multiplicative, you tend to get more happiness occurring. You tend to get more progress. But that isn't the whole equation. But if any of them are 0, then things fall apart. Like you had in Japan, it was closed off from the entire society for a long time until the 1800s. And they were using swords when the guns came. Or the potato famine. That's why you have low diversity. If you don't have enough material, then you don't reach that level of prosperity. If you have no network effects, then you can't grow. And if you don't have the I and you're increasing your intelligence, then again, there's no progress. So I think
really fast, just for people following along at home, that's your MIND framework, MIND. So each of those is part of the 4 things that you're optimizing for, yes?
Yeah. And it's the optimizing for the balance of them because it's multiplicative, not additive. And again, you can see
Okay.
that in your own personal lives as well. You need to have a balance of your material, your intelligence, your network, and diversity. Like a lot of people build their networks, they don't really think about it. But if you just build your networks completely without any eye, then you're a socialite without that many skills, right? If you don't have the diversity, then it might work for a while, but then what happens when you hit a crisis? So we found out that, again, you can express those mathematically, and also you can have elements that show that in historical crashes and historical booms and more. And the best societies, like, for example, Singapore, have managed to balance them really well, where you have intelligence, network diversity, and M. Not perfectly, but when one of those goes, you have an individual breakdown or you have a societal breakdown. And this is something we have to look at as we're building towards what's coming, where intelligence becomes incredibly abundant.
Okay. So I want to lock these ideas in. You do a really good job in the book of sort of giving us concrete things to hold on to. So one of them is the idea of GDP as a dashboard. It's a bad dashboard. You've called it in the book insanity. The new dashboard is what we just walked through, the mind framework. Okay, so if we have those 2 dashboards and we're living in this hyper transitional moment, what are the signs that we can look at to see evidence that we have been in a period of transition for quite a while?
In the book, I put that there have been 4 inversions and we're in the final inversion. We've kind of moved from land, where it was about the amount of land and then the serfs and the people that you had on the land operating, to then you had labor, which you had cities that emerged like Manchester and others, where you could kind of bring labor and then apply capital, where you then built factories. Now it's an intelligence inversion whereby most of the GDP will be driven by these machines that can just go abundant and massively so. When you start looking at these other capitals, the I and D versus the classical M, that's the material GDP, you kind of start measuring different things, which is things like what is the organizational resilience of a society due to the diversity effects of its economy? And we have measures for that. And again, we have that on an organizational level as well, where we have different types of organization. Organizations that are just hyper-focused on one thing have low diversity, so they can't adapt to what's coming, versus ones that have lots of teams empowered by AI can most likely adapt better. N becomes a very important thing as well. This is something that we've lost a lot.